I was in London for a business trip, on a FaceTime call with Sophia, the woman I'd married to seal a merger. Suddenly, a voice echoed from her end of the call. Leo Vance. Sophia, baby, could you come scrub my back? Panic flashed across Sophia's face. She rushed to explain. Ethan, don't get the wrong idea. Leo got drunk at a reception, and I was just dropping him off at his apartment. My hand, holding a fountain pen, tightened for a second before I relaxed my grip. My voice was laced with ice. This is a critical time, right before our two companies merge and go public. Don't let a sex scandal derail this entire deal. If you do, there will be hell to pay. Ethan, just let me explain. I ended the call before she could finish and went back to my work. It was a marriage of corporate convenience. Who had the energy to waste on emotional screw-ups who thought love was all that mattered? In this world, money is power. Controlling the economic lifeline is the only thing that counts. Once the new conglomerate was successfully listed, I'd settle the score with all of them. Ethan, dear, has Sophia arrived yet? The family is all here. We're just waiting on you, our guest of honor. We'll be on our way soon, Eleanor. She's just in the restroom. I lied smoothly. Hanging up, I scanned the arrivals pickup area at JFK. I saw my familiar Maybach driver, but Sophia was nowhere in sight. I wasn't surprised. I told the driver to head for the Miller family estate in Greenwich and settled into the back, closing my eyes. Casual lies like that had become the norm in my marriage to Sophia. Our relationship was purely transactional. 3 years ago, to honor an agreement made by our grandfathers, I returned from finishing my MBA abroad and married Sophia Miller, the heiress to the Miller fortune. To solidify the alliance between our families and to elevate my own standing, we had a child within the first year. I never once considered trying to cultivate a real relationship. Sophia's heart belonged to someone else. Any attempt at affection on my part would have been a waste of time. The man she was in love with was my stepbrother, Leo Vance. The moment I'd left for my studies overseas, Leo had swooped in, trying to push me out of the picture and take my place. It was typical of him. Growing up, he'd always been the favorite, shamelessly taking whatever he wanted from me with our mother's blessing. His ambition didn't surprise me in the least, but I wasn't worried. Besides having the unwavering support of Sophia's parents, I also trusted Sophia herself. We'd grown up together, and despite a few lost years after a certain incident, we were practically childhood sweethearts. I didn't think she was the type to completely lose her head. Reality, however, hit me like a ton of bricks. I remember one of our transatlantic video calls. During a brief 15-minute conversation, she spent 10 minutes talking about Leo. That's when I finally realized how wrong I'd been. I locked away the foolish, hopeful part of my heart for good. I didn't fight with her or cause a scene. I just kept organizing my files, offering non-committal responses as she chattered on. There's no point in chaining yourself to someone whose heart has already left. I decided to treat it for what it was, a fair, calculated business exchange. Back then, I had even tried to warn her, framing it as a joke. You know, with our family's companies about to merge and go public, you might want to be a little more discreet. We wouldn't want any nasty rumors flying around. It was a clear warning. Sophia was smart. She had to have understood. But she chose to play dumb. She even defended him. Ethan, what are you talking about? I'm your fiancé. Leo has always been fragile, she'd said, and he struggles with depression. I'm just looking out for him, as his future sister-in-law. The tenderness in her voice was unmistakable, and it was far from the way one should speak about a brother. I didn't call her on it. Burning that bridge would have been a mistake. It would have only played into Leo's hands and soured my relationship with the Millers. After the call, I instructed my most trusted associate back in the States to keep a close eye on her. If necessary, he was to arrange an accident to disrupt their little trysts. On our wedding day, she came to me untouched. We had our son. To be absolutely sure, I ran a discreet paternity test. Only after the results confirmed the child was mine did I finally breathe a sigh of relief. The Miller Corporation's overseas network was extensive. I threw myself into my work, laying the foundation for my own empire. As for Sophia, after she finished nursing our son for the first year, I stopped paying attention to her. I let her parents, the responsible ones, take over raising the boy, and I let her waste away. She had already served her purpose. Once the new company went public, Once I had reclaimed everything I'd lost and held all the power, then it would be time to settle old debts. Sophia called just as my car was leaving the airport expressway, heading toward the sprawling Miller estate in Greenwich. Her voice was apologetic. "Ethan, I am so sorry I wasn't there to pick you up." Leo's stomach was bothering him, and by the time I made sure he was okay, it was too late. "Are you a doctor?" I snapped. "He's a 26-year-old man. Can't he call an ambulance?" The temperature inside the car plunged. In the rearview mirror, I saw my driver swallow hard. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Even if I didn't care about her, I was still a man. No man wants his wife acting like a nursemaid to another man, especially when that man is a stepbrother, only 2 years his junior. "Ethan, don't be angry. I wasn't thinking straight." "Whatever." I cut her off. "Same plan as always. Meet me at the outdoor mall near the estate." I hung up and took a deep breath, willing the cold fury to subside. The driver's posture was rigid, sensing the tension. Driving like that was an accident waiting to happen, and I couldn't afford any complications. Half an hour later, I was standing outside the mall, smoking a cigarette while I waited. A few minutes later, a red Ferrari pulled into the spot across from me. Sophia got out and hurried over. "Honey, have you been waiting long?" "Just got here," I said, my eyes fixed on the pale skin of her neck. "Is it a new scarf?" "A scarf?" she asked, confused. "Why would I wear a scarf? It would totally clash with this dress." I pulled out my phone, opened the camera app, and flipped the view so she could see the screen. The angry, purple mark on her neck stood out like a beacon. "Oh," she gasped, instinctively covering it with her hand. "How?" "I go into the mall and buy a scarf to cover that up," I said, my voice flat. "Your parents have been married for over 30 years. They'll know I'm not the kind of man who leaves marks like that." My words had a double meaning. Sophia took a step back, her eyes darting away. I pushed him off. It didn't go any further. "Go, buy the damn scarf," I ordered, my voice turning to steel. "Don't waste any more time. The entire family is waiting." She bit her lip and said nothing more, turning and walking quickly toward the stores. 20 minutes later, she was back in the car. I nodded to the driver, and we pulled away. I was thankful this driver was one of my guys. If one of the Miller's staff had seen this, it would have been another mess to clean up. Not that her parents would do anything drastic. Sophia was their daughter. Their anger would amount to little more than a slap on the wrist. But if she felt cornered and threw a tantrum, it would only complicate my plans. On the drive from a mall to the estate, Leo called her at least 7 times. Finally, with a flash of annoyance in her eyes, she grit her teeth and shut her phone off. "Ethan, please don't be angry," she said, forcing a smile, her tone pleading. "This welcome home dinner for you is what's important. I'm not going to deal with him." I rubbed my arm, a shiver of disgust running down my spine. "I'm not angry," I said with a cool indifference. "I'm not in love with you, remember?" Her bright, beautiful eyes froze. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I turned to face her, looking at the face that had once made my heart race, but now left me completely cold. "This is a business arrangement. We are partners," I stated. "I don't care what you do in your private life, but you will not create a scandal that affects our bottom line. If you jeopardize this merger, you know there will be consequences." With that, I closed my eyes again, feigning sleep, and didn't say another word to her for the rest of the drive. When the car arrived at the Miller estate, Robert and Eleanor were already waiting at the front door. I put on a pleasant smile and, after helping Sophia out of the car, took her hand as we walked toward her parents. "Mom, Dad," I said with a hint of apology. "Sorry to keep you all waiting." "Nonsense. We're just glad you're back," Eleanor said, reaching up to touch my cheek. She sighed. "You've worked so hard overseas. You've gotten too thin." Her genuine concern made me smile. "Not at all. Leaner is stronger." Before she could say more, Robert interjected. "All right, let's get our boy inside for dinner. He must be starving after that long flight." Eleanor's focus shifted, and she quickly ushered me into the grand villa. Before dinner, there was a small but significant moment. Robert insisted I sit between him and Eleanor at the dining table. It was the head of the table, the seat of honor. I tried to refuse, but they were adamant, so I relented. I understood their gesture. They were publicly affirming their support for me, elevating my status in front of the entire Miller clan. Sophia, seated next to her mother, faded into the background, the once dazzling heiress now just a footnote. Throughout the meal, Eleanor kept piling food onto my plate. Within minutes, it was a small mountain. Seeing my slight embarrassment, she reassured me. This is just family, Ethan. No need for formalities. Eat up. After a fine meal and a few rounds of drinks with various relatives, the welcome home dinner began to wind down. But Eleanor had noticed Sophia's silence throughout the evening, and her eyes kept drifting to the out-of-place silk scarf around her neck. "Honey, what's with the scarf?" she asked curiously, reaching over and untying it before Sophia could react. The angry, red mark was suddenly exposed for everyone to see. Robert's eyes followed his wife's, and both of their faces darkened instantly. With so many relatives present, however, they held their tempers in check. The guests, assuming it was a sign of passion between a reunited husband and wife, didn't think much of it. But as Robert's silent fury filled the room, the cheerful atmosphere grew heavy and tense. Within 10 minutes, the party was over. His face a thunderous mask, Robert told Sophia to follow him to his study. Eleanor, her expression deeply apologetic, asked me to come with them. Inside the study, Robert paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back. Eleanor had me sit down and began to prepare some tea, pointedly ignoring her daughter, who was left standing. After a few moments of unbearable silence, Sophia couldn't take it anymore. "Dad, what is this all about?" That single question was the spark that ignited Robert's fury. He spun around and slapped his daughter across the face. "You shameless, disrespectful girl," he roared. "Everything your mother and I taught you about dignity, about honor, was it all for nothing? And you have the nerve to ask me what's wrong?" "Dad, don't you dare call me Dad. I, Robert Miller, am not worthy of being the father of such a person." Seeing her father's rage, Sophia looked desperately toward her mother for help, her hand pressed to her reddening cheek. But Eleanor simply squeezed my hand, a clear sign of whose side she was on. She looked at her daughter, her face stern. "Sophia, haven't I warned you about spending so much time with Leo Vance? But you didn't listen. You continued to cheat, to disgrace yourself. Are you trying to drag the Miller family's name through the mud?" she continued. "Have you no respect for Ethan? Have you forgotten the legacy this family has built for generations?" At the word cheat, the color drained from Sophia's face. But she fought back. I didn't cheat. I pushed him away. "You can't accuse me of something I didn't do." "Accuse you?" Robert's voice was now dangerously low. "So in your mind, the only thing that counts as cheating is sleeping with another man. Don't forget, you are a married woman with a child. Is this how a wife and a mother is supposed to act?" Sophia was defeated, silent. She bowed her head as tears streamed down her cheeks and dripped onto the polished floor. As her husband, and as someone who had known her since childhood, I recognized the signs. She had surrendered. But Robert wasn't finished. "You will go to the library. You will stay there and write 100 times, 'I will honor the name of my family.' And I want it handwritten, with a fountain pen." For at 11 o'clock that night, I helped a limping Sophia back to our house. I got her settled on the sofa and found some ointment for her to apply to her knees. She hadn't finished the writing. The Miller family creed was over 1,000 words long. It would have taken her until the next night to complete it. I had work to do the next day, and I didn't want to put Robert and Eleanor in an awkward position after they defended me so fiercely. So I had intervened, asking her father to let it go. For a pampered woman like Sophia, a full day and night of kneeling would have permanently damaged her knees. As she slowly began to rub the ointment on her legs, I poured her a glass of water and prepared to head to the guest room for the night. "Ethan, wait. What is it?" I asked, turning to face her with a neutral expression. "I know I was wrong," she said, her eyes red as fresh tears began to fall. "I let his sob story get to me. I swear I will never contact him again." She was realizing this now. It was too late. After years of this delusion, she had zero credibility with me. But I didn't press the issue. "Okay," I said flatly. "I'm going to bed. I have a long day tomorrow." With that, I walked up the stairs to the guest room, the faint sound of her sobbing echoing from the living room below. I ignored it. The next morning, I was at the office before sunrise. I cleared the backlog of documents for my trip before starting to strategize the post-IPO phase of the new conglomerate. Just as I was taking a moment to recharge with a coffee, my assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Ford, Leo Vance is at the reception desk demanding to see you. Should I send him up? My eyebrows shot up. Yes, let him in. A few minutes later, Leo sauntered into my office, dressed in a ridiculously expensive designer suit that did nothing to hide his slouching posture. He glanced around the room before slumping into the chair across from my desk, propping his feet up on the polished wood. He saw me frown but smirked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Ethan, my dear brother, why so serious? We're family, after all. You should try to be more like Sophia. She's so much more fun. My gaze turned to ice, but I kept my voice even. State your business or get out. Leo slammed his feet back on the floor and shot up, his eyes filled with venom. Sophia's ignoring me. What did you do? That's her business. Don't lie to me, he snarled. Everything was fine yesterday. I almost had her. Then she goes to that damn estate with you. And suddenly she's a different person. You're telling me you had nothing to do with it. My patience, already worn thin, finally snapped. That's because your act is pathetic, I retorted. A grown man, whining and playing the victim like a child. What woman would put up with that for long? You'd be useless even as a boy toy for some rich cougar. They'd probably mistake you for a lost puppy. Leo's face turned beet red. He pointed a trembling finger at me, utterly speechless because he knew every word I said was true. I let out a cold laugh. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or were you just too busy getting manhandled last night? You're dead, he screamed, grabbing the heavy wooden pen holder from my desk and hurling at my head. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I dodged it easily, vaulted over the desk in one smooth motion, and planted my fist squarely in his smug, pale face. Act! Leo cried out, collapsing to the floor, clutching his bleeding nose and mouth. He stared up at me in terror. You hit me. Hit you. I loosened my tie and tossed it onto the desk, looking down at him. No, I'm going to beat you. I leaned down and unleashed a barrage of punches. As he howled and tried feebly to block the blows, Leo gasped out a threat. Ethan Ford, if you touch me again, I'm telling Mom and Dad. They'll disown you. I didn't stop punching. Are you a toddler? Still running to Mommy and Daddy? I sneered, my blows landing with more force. You ever heard of respect? You dare to make a move on my wife, your own sister-in-law? Today, I'm going to teach you a lesson you'll never forget. Ignoring his screams, my fists rained down on his face. After 2 minutes, his cries weakened to pathetic, guttural whimpers. Feeling like I'd collected enough of the interest on his debt, I finally stopped, sinking to the floor to catch my breath. As I was massaging my bruised knuckles, Leo suddenly lunged. He pulled a switchblade from his pocket and slashed at my throat. I threw myself backward, instinctively raising my arm to block the attack. The blade sliced a deep 4-inch gash along my forearm. Leo's face was a bloody mask, his eyes blazing with hatred. I'm going to kill you, he shrieked, lunging at me again. The tip of the knife stopped less than 2 inches from my eye. I used my knee to keep his body at a distance, while both of my hands clamped down on his wrist, preventing the blade from moving another inch. Searing pain shot through my arm, and my blood dripped onto my face, but I couldn't relax my grip for a second. I was exhausted from the fight, my arms shaking uncontrollably. I fought to control my breathing, try to regain any bit of strength I could. We were locked in a stalemate. Suddenly, the office door burst open. Sophia, my assistant, and 2 security guards rushed in. They tore a wild-eyed Leo off me and slammed him to the ground. I lay in a private hospital room with an 4 drip, slowly feeding antibiotics into my arm. From the room next door, I could occasionally hear the pig-like squeals of Leo Vance. Half an hour earlier, after making sure I was settled, Sophia had stormed off with the security guards to deal with Leo. This scene, her defending me, felt strangely familiar. Back in middle school, Leo, emboldened by our mother's favoritism, had led a group of his friends in bullying me. They tore up my textbooks, cornered me in the bathroom for beatings, and then urinated on me afterward. When I tearfully told our mother, she met my pleas with cold indifference. Even the teachers at school wouldn't intervene, but Sophia did. After school, she had her family's bodyguards break Leo's leg and shove his head into a toilet until he nearly passed out. She had stood over him, pointing a finger, and declared, If you ever touch my fiancée again, I'll have you thrown in the river. In that moment, she was like a ray of light in my dark, hopeless world. I swore to myself that I would become strong enough to be the one to protect her. But fate had played a cruel joke on me. Somehow, Leo's act, the reformed bad boy, the fragile soul, had completely captivated her. She had once even suggested that I transfer some of the Ford Industries stock my grandfather had left me to Leo. For years, even while studying abroad, I could never fully accept this bizarre turn of events. Now, seeing her punish Leo once again, a small crack appeared in the wall I had built around my heart. But I quickly sealed it shut. I couldn't afford to gamble on her again. I couldn't trust her. If her heart could change once, it could change again for someone else. Better to focus on my work, on building my own strength. The door opened softly. Seeing that I was awake, Sophia hurried to my bedside. She gently stroked my bandaged arm, her eyes full of pain. "I'm so sorry, Ethan. I was too late. He sent me a text saying he was going to teach you a lesson. I should have called to warn you," she continued. "But don't worry. I didn't just slap him 100 times. I had the guards break 5 of his fingers. He will never bother you again." A sudden sting filled my nose, and a tear escaped, rolling down my temple and into the pillow. I felt pathetic. I ripped the 4 needle out of my arm, wiped my eyes, and glared at her. "Sophia," I said, my voice thick with a strange new resolve. "I don't need you anymore." With that, I walked out of the room. As much as I hated Leo and my mother, the one who had hurt me the most, the one I resented with every fiber of my being, was her. That evening, I locked myself in my home office and buried myself in work. It was the only way to silence the noise in my head. Just as I finished giving instructions to my assistant, my phone rang. It was my mother. I didn't have to guess why she was calling. It was to defend her precious son. The moment I answered, a hysterical shriek erupted from the speaker. "Ethan Ford, you've gotten bold, haven't you? You think you're a big shot now. How dare you do that to your brother? You get over here right now and kneel and apologize to Leo." I set the phone down on the desk and rubbed my ear. "Stop screaming," I said coldly. "Catherine, your son tried to kill me with a knife. Was I not supposed to fight back? You dare use my full name? I used to be weak, helpless. But now I control the future of both the Ford and Miller empires. Did you really think you could still push me around like you used to? You little bastard. Even if I am, I'm still a step above you, you old monster." I shot back, my voice sharp. "Catherine, don't think for a second I don't know about all the filthy, disgusting things you've done." A flicker of panic came from the other end. What? What do you know?" I laughed, a humorless, chilling sound. "You don't need to worry about that. If you want to keep collecting dividends from the 2% of shares you still hold, I suggest you learn to stay in your place and keep your mouth shut." I hung up before she could respond. My eyes fell on a framed photo on my desk. It was a family portrait, but I had carefully cut Catherine and Leo out of it, leaving an awkward gap. "Dad, grandfather," I thought. "This is the real face of your good wife, your good daughter-in-law." When I was 5, I was slapped by my mother for pushing Leo after he tried to snatch my favorite toy. I ran out of the house in a fit of anger. That was when I was kidnapped and sold to a family in a remote, mountainous region. My father, forgetting his anger at my mother, immediately organized a search party, leaving my grandfather to manage the company. A year later, he finally got a solid lead, but his car was involved in a major accident on a treacherous mountain road. Because of the remote location, he died from his injuries before help could arrive. By the time my grandfather rescued me and brought me home, all that was left of my father was a black and white photograph. It was as if my grandfather aged 10 years overnight. His back, once straight and proud, became stooped. He hated my mother, but was powerless to do anything. At the time, her family, the Van Cess, were a dominant force in the next state over, while Ford Industries was still a relatively small company. Thinking of the hundreds of families who depended on the company, he swallowed his grief and anger. He moved us out of the house I'd shared with my parents and back into the old Ford family home. For the first few years, with my grandfather protecting me, Leo and his mother never dared to lay a hand on me. But the year I started middle school, my grandfather's health took a turn for the worse. The grief of losing his son, combined with years of overwork, caused old war injuries to flare up. He passed away not long after. I can still see the worry and regret in his eyes as he lay on his deathbed, terrified for the young boy he was leaving behind. The Fords had been a line of only sons for 3 generations. He had no choice but to leave a detailed will, hiring lawyers, and setting up a trust to protect me. The company, which had grown significantly, was put in the hands of a professional management team, but he was forced to grant some power to my mother. After all, she was my only legal guardian. I had hoped she might treat me better, knowing her own family had always favored her brother over her. I prayed that the wealth my grandfather had left her would temper her cruelty. But we were both wrong. That woman was a monster. In public, she played the role of the grieving widow and devoted mother. But in private, she beat me, starved me, and often brought a strange young man home late at night. She was clever. Knowing the Millers were keeping an eye on things at my grandfather's request, she would place a thick book over my body before hitting me with a rubber truncheon, leaving no visible bruises. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. While she and the young man were asleep, I took a kitchen knife and went to her room. But the man woke up and kicked me across the floor. My mother was furious. To avoid a scandal, she told everyone that my kidnapping had left me with severe psychological issues. She had me committed to a private mental institution. I spent 6 months in that hell. Just when I had lost all hope, Robert and Eleanor Miller grew suspicious. After some investigation, they discovered where I was and rescued me. They used what they knew to threaten my mother into relinquishing my custody to them. For people of their generation, reputation was everything. They chose to protect me and hold the secret over her head rather than cause a public scandal that would tarnish my future. Besides, my grandfather's will stipulated that I would inherit control of the company upon my college graduation. From the end of middle school through high school, I lived with the Millers. For college, I went abroad, studying and interning at the Miller Corporation's international branches. During that time, I didn't just study. I used the first money I ever earned to hire professional martial arts instructors. I was determined to become stronger in every way. I had to survive. I had to build my own empire. Those monsters were still out there, living their lives. I had no right to give up. I hadn't sent them to hell yet, and I hadn't yet fulfilled my grandfather's dream of seeing Ford Industries go public. 5 days flashed by. Today was the day. The celebration for the successful launch of the new conglomerate, a merger of the Ford and Miller empires. Every major player in the industry would be there, along with the national media. At the moment, however, I was reluctantly letting Sophia help me shower. The gash on my arm was too deep to get wet, and after days of sponge baths, I couldn't show up to such a momentous occasion looking unkempt. "Ethan, what do you think of this suit?" Sophia held up a new, custom-tailored suit. "It's designed for comfort without sacrificing formality. It should be perfect for you right now." I nodded. "Fine, you handle it." Since she had dealt with Leo, she had become a different person. Her focus had shifted entirely to our family. She started taking cooking classes and even brought our son home from her parents' estate to care for him herself. I remained unmoved, but for the sake of my son, who needed a mother and a stable home, I let her try. Our relationship would remain a partnership. We would partner to grow the company, partner to raise our children, and partner to continue both the Ford and Miller legacies. That was all I needed. Dressed and ready, we presented a united front as we rode in the Rolls-Royce Phantom to the event venue. An hour later, the grand ballroom was already filled with guests. The media was in position. My assistant met me at the door and confirmed that all prior arrangements were in place. I gave a calm nod, but inside, my heart was pounding with anticipation. I had waited for this moment for so long. Suddenly, a familiar yet unwelcome voice called out, "Nephew, my dear nephew." My uncle, Catherine's half-brother, rushed over, a wide grin on his face. "Congratulations, to merge 2 companies that were at a stalemate and take them public. It's a brilliant move. I hope you'll remember to help out Vance Industries in the future." I offered a polite, meaningless smile and nodded. Help them? That would depend on what was left of their fortunes. This was the man who now ran the Vance family company. Thanks to his incompetence, it was a shadow of its former self. It would have gone bankrupt years ago if Catherine hadn't used her power at Ford Industries to funnel money to her family. Still, their manufacturing line and a few key engineers had some value. I was already planning the acquisition. He and his family had known about the abuse I suffered and had looked the other way. They had even tried to pressure me into signing over my shares. Half an hour later, the gala for the launch of Ethelred Global officially began. The ballroom was packed. My mother, Catherine, was flitting through the crowd like a social butterfly, networking and trying to secure resources for Leo, who was still recovering. I had specifically instructed Sophia, as her daughter-in-law, to invite her. The stage was set. It wouldn't be a show without the main villain. Finally, the speeches began. After a few minutes of opening remarks, it was my turn to take the stage. "Ethan, are you sure about this?" Sophia whispered, her face etched with worry. "This is such an important day. If this goes wrong, it could backfire spectacularly. Don't worry, everything is taken care of." I walked toward the center of the stage. Living under the same roof, Sophia knew parts of my plan. I had told her to test her allegiance. If she had faltered, I would not have hesitated to cut her out, regardless of my debt to her family. I glanced at Robert and Eleanor Miller, beaming with pride in the front row. Thankfully, their daughter hadn't been foolish enough to choose the wrong side. I took the microphone and delivered the standard corporate speech. Just as everyone thought I was about to wrap up and move to the next part of the program, I changed my tone. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, my voice ringing through the silent hall. "Before we continue, I have something very important to share with you all. Please, direct your attention to the main screen." As the crowd murmured in confusion, I signaled my assistant. The first thing that appeared on the screen were photos and hidden camera videos from my childhood. My mother, Catherine, beating me, and Leo leading his friends and tormenting me. The quality was grainy, but the faces were unmistakable. My mother, who had been glowing with pride just moments before, froze. The champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. No one noticed. They were all transfixed, horrified. No one could have imagined that the woman who had so carefully crafted an image of a loving mother was capable of such cruelty. I said nothing, simply signaling for the next set of files. This, I knew, would blow the roof off the place. The screen now showed bank transfers and encrypted messages, evidence that Catherine had paid human traffickers to kidnap me. This was followed by a video deposition from one of the surviving traffickers. Then came the final, devastating blow, evidence that she had bribed a truck driver to stage an accident due to fatigue, intentionally ramming my father's car on that mountain road. As I had expected, the room erupted. Every eye in the hall turned to Catherine, who now looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "No, that's not possible," she muttered, her face ashen, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. "It's fake. It has to be fake." A few seconds later, she snapped, screaming like a madwoman. "It's a lie, all of it. Shut it off. Ethan Ford, you shut it off right now." She tried to rush the stage, but the security guards I had placed nearby intercepted her, restraining her and covering her mouth with a piece of tape. How strangely familiar. It was the same thing she used to do to me when she didn't want to hear my crying, stuffing a dirty rag in my mouth and taping it shut. I had omitted the rag. I was being merciful. The guests began to whisper amongst themselves. "Is that woman insane? That's her own son." I'd heard rumors that Catherine was cold to her older son, but I never thought. I remember something odd. Shortly after old Mr. Ford died, Ethan disappeared for a while. Then suddenly he was living with the Millers. Do you think she did something to him? It makes sense. She spent years using Ford resources to prop up her own family's company. And I heard she tried to force Ethan to give up his shares when he first took over. But why would she kill her own husband? I know a secret about that. Another guest chimed in. Catherine was never in love with the old CEO. She tricked him into marrying her. She was having an affair with some young actor, but he disappeared after he went overseas. Hearing her darkest secrets being aired out, Catherine struggled violently, shaking her head. But with her hands bound and her mouth gagged, all she could produce were muffled, desperate sobs. A small smile played on my lips. This was only the beginning. The real bombshell was yet to come. I motioned for quiet. The savviest people in the room knew the show wasn't over. They watched with rapt attention. If what they had just seen was shocking, the next revelation would be apocalyptic. This kind of scandal was rare, even among the most dysfunctional elite families. The image on the screen changed again. It was old hotel security footage from when I was less than 2 years old, showing Catherine meeting with that disappeared young actor. The video was blurry, but after a great deal of work with new restoration technology, the faces were recognizable. When Catherine saw the footage, she looked like she had seen a ghost. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with terror. Next, I displayed pages from a diary that had belonged to the young actor. It detailed, in his own words, how his affair with Catherine had begun. It described how she had become pregnant with his child and passed Leo off as a Ford. It was all born from her hatred. The next witness to appear on screen was my father's original fiancée. She recounted how my father, a brilliant and handsome businessman, had been targeted by Catherine at a party. My father was already engaged, so Catherine drugged him, slept with him, and then threatened to go to the police unless he married her. She then anonymously mailed a video of their encounter to his fiancée and had her threatened into silence. The fiancée and her family fled the country, and my father, cornered, married the then powerful heiress of the Vance family. As the audience wondered what this story of spurned lover had to do with anything, one final video played. It was a recording made by a nanny who had been fired years ago. She explained that my father and Catherine's marriage was loveless. Soon after, I was born. Catherine had hoped that having a child would soften my father's heart toward her, but he only paid attention to me, treating her as if she were invisible. Her resentment grew, and she began to resent me. She would deliberately let me go hungry to get his attention, which only made him despise her more. When I was just over a year old, they had a massive fight, and Catherine stormed out. She returned the next day, full of apologies, and told my grandfather she wanted to have another child to secure the Ford lineage. Soon after, Leo was born. The video ended. The hall was completely silent. Every person in that room was sharp enough to connect the dots. I didn't leave them guessing. I signaled my assistant to display the final piece of evidence. It was a paternity test between my father and Leo Vance. The results were displayed in large, bold letters. No biological relationship. This was thanks to my grandfather. He had suspected something was wrong and had secretly secured a DNA sample. He had died suddenly, but he had mentioned his suspicions in a letter that was to be given to me when I came of age. It was only on my 18th birthday that I finally understood why my mother had treated me with such cruelty. I was nothing more than an outlet for her bitterness. From that day forward, I began to gather evidence. It was a slow process. I was too weak, too powerless. It wasn't until I went abroad and built my own resources that I could truly begin to investigate. I had finally assembled the complete picture the year I was married. But Catherine still held a significant amount of power within Ford Industries. I had to sideline her first. I couldn't risk destroying the company my father and grandfather had built. So I worked tirelessly, growing my own power while plotting my revenge. Today, the time was finally right. I had squeezed every last drop of value out of her. Catherine was broken. Her face was a mask of gray, her eyes utterly devoid of hope. She knew this wasn't just a public shaming, but a tiny flicker of desperation remained. She looked at me, her eyes pleading for a way out. I walked over to where she was being held and crouched down, my voice a demonic whisper. Remember on the phone the other day, when I told you I knew everything you'd done? I mocked her. Well, now you know what I meant. She thrashed wildly, trying to lunge at me, but the guards held her fast. All that came from her was a powerless, muffled scream. I looked at her with amusement and patted her cheek. This evidence is more than enough to secure a death penalty, I said softly. Go say hello to my father and grandfather for me. I signaled the guards. It was time to deliver Catherine to the authorities. As for Leo, still laid up in the hospital, I had a much better place in mind for him. The gala ended up being a spectacular success, but my work was far from over. The moment the event concluded, I had my PR team release a carefully crafted narrative to the media. They painted me as a figure of resilience and fortitude, a man who had overcome unimaginable adversity. The story of Catherine and Leo's treachery was used to build my legend. As a result, the company's stock didn't fall. It soared. The next day, just as I predicted, the stock price skyrocketed. My story went viral. Hashtags trended on Twitter. People flooded the new company's website with messages of support, demanding I create a personal social media account. I obliged. Within an hour, I had 5 million followers. After posting my first inspirational message, I headed to the city's premier psychiatric hospital. Leo Vance was now a resident, undergoing intensive inpatient therapy. It was all thanks to his own pathetic ploy. To win Sophia's sympathy, he had managed to get himself a legitimate diagnosis for major depressive disorder. As his loving older brother, I couldn't possibly cast him out and let him fend for himself. I was a compassionate man, after all. Looking through the reinforced glass of his private room, I saw him strapped to a bed and felt a pang of dissatisfaction. He was still injured. Surely he needed more dedicated care. I immediately made a substantial donation to the hospital for new equipment and facilities to ensure his well-being. Then, worried he might get lonely, I made another donation with the specific request that several of the hospital's more gregarious female patients with schizophrenia be moved into his spacious room to keep him company. Now, watching Leo sob with joy amidst his new friends, I could hear his happy shouts of my name even through the soundproof door. I smiled genuinely. It seemed my dear brother was quite pleased with the arrangements. He could live out the rest of his days here. I would not be disturbing him again. A month later, I was reviewing the quarterly reports. The company's performance was explosive. I smiled with satisfaction. It was good, but not good enough. My assistant entered. It was time to go. Time for Catherine's execution. My evidence had been airtight. The state had taken less than 2 weeks to verify everything and hand down a death sentence. Today was her last day on Earth. I had bought her favorite cake to see her off. A final act of filial piety. It had taken days of petitions to get approval for the visit. I entered the sterile room alone, carrying the cake box. Catherine was already strapped to the metal gurney. In just a few weeks, she had aged decades. Her hair was white, her face a roadmap of wrinkles. When she saw me, her expression twisted. "Mother," I said, opening the cake box. "I've come to see you off. This is from your favorite bakery. Have a piece." The room was instantly filled with a pungent, overwhelming scent of cilantro. She despised cilantro. The smell alone could make her gag. Her eyes, full of despair, pleaded with me. But then I showed her a recent photo of Leo, blissfully happy in his new home. She resigned herself and ate. She only managed a third of it before she threw up. It didn't matter. Time was up. After a final, silent farewell, I turned and left the room. Go in peace, I thought. Father and grandfather are waiting for you on the other side. 3 years later, Robert and Eleanor Miller officially retired to dote on Sophia, who was pregnant with our second child. Over these years, she had been a model partner. She excelled at her role in the company while also taking on the full responsibilities of managing our home and raising our son. A wife that good deserved a second child, to continue our legacies and to give our son a companion. I signed the last document and looked over at my son, playing happily in the private play area I had built in my office. He was a good boy. He knew never to disturb me when I was working. Seeing I was finished, he came running over on his little legs. "Daddy, can you play with me now?" he asked, his face full of hope. "Just for a little while." I smiled and nodded. For my son, I always had time. That evening, I carried my sleeping son into the house. After putting him to bed, I went to the study to continue working. A few moments later, Sophia, her baby bump now prominent, walked in. "Ethan, can we talk?" "About what?" I asked, looking up from my screen, deciding to hear her out. Sophia bit her lip. "Can we start over? For real this time?" I paused. We never ended anything. What is there to start over? She looked down, her voice trembling. "I swear, Ethan, I never crossed that line with Leo. The night he tried to force himself on me, I slapped him and came straight to find you. It's been 3 years. I report my every move to you. I've done everything to earn back your trust. Can't you forgive me?" Her voice broke. "Leo is gone. The thing that was between us is gone. Can't you look at me the way you did when we were in school? Can't you love me again?" I rubbed my temples, glancing at her pregnant belly. My voice was gentle. "Sophia, let's just keep things as they are. It's good this way, isn't it? Out in the world, you are the respected vice chairwoman and COO of a global corporation. At home, you are a wonderful mother to our children. That is more than enough. Why do you need to chase something as fleeting and unreliable as love?" My own voice grew with passion. "You shouldn't be wasting your time on tears and sentiment. You should be focused, fighting for our children's future building a greater foundation for the generations to come. I took a sip of water, my throat dry. We have our children. We can continue on as a family, as partners. It's the perfect arrangement. Sophia turned her head away, silent. I knew it was a sign of her resistance. I was growing impatient, about to suggest she go back to her room, when Eleanor walked in with a tray of herbal tea. Seeing her daughter's red-rimmed eyes, her expression hardened. Sophia, what are you doing in here bothering Ethan? You should be in your room, resting. Go back now, she chided gently. Your most important job is to take care of yourself and that baby. This child will carry the Miller name, you know? How can you be so reckless? I gave my mother-in-law a discreet thumbs up. Eleanor set the tea down, shot me a look that said I'll handle this, and gently but firmly escorted Sophia out of the study. I turned my attention back to my work. Ethelred Global had just broken into the $100 billion club. It was a milestone, but it was nowhere near enough. Even if it was enough for my 2 children, what about my grandchildren? My great-grandchildren? I had to think of them, of the dynasty we were building. I had to work harder. I had to keep pushing. Let's go, I thought to myself. I would make this company the most powerful in the world. I would build a fortress of wealth for my descendants. The end.